All right, so first I'd like to review some of the Rule 18, some of the mark rounding rules. So I'll just draw a 3-boat length circle here around the green mark. Hopefully that stayed about 3 boat lengths. So first off, we have the definition of mark room. So there's 3 basic parts. If you are owed mark room, so for example here, green is ahead of a line coming off of blue's transom. That means that green has mark room. So what mark room means, first of all, blue has to allow green to pass the mark on the required side, which in this case is mark to port. So that's pretty obvious. Second point is that blue has to allow green to sail to the mark. So for example, if they had been sailing this way, green sailing this direction only because blue is the leeward boat. Then when the first of the 2 boats reaches the circle, green is owed mark room, which means that blue has to allow green to sail to the mark. So that's the second part. And if this overlap is broken, blue still has to allow green to sail to the mark. Everything was decided when the first boat gets into this zone. Then the final part, the most important part, is that green is allowed to sail around the mark as necessary to sail the course. So right now these boats are on port tack by the lee, so it would be unlikely that green could really say, hey, I want a ton of room here, but if they did try to do that, that would not be allowed. That would be an unnecessary amount of room. So the rule is saying that green is allowed to sail to the mark and then around the mark as necessary to sail the course. Another word that comes up in the definition of room is seamanlike. Not a well-defined term, but basically it's not excessive. So maybe let's find a more obvious version of this. So if this is a gate mark, and then you've got the yellow mark as your other gate mark, and it's somewhere off the screen over here. Maybe I'll just draw in the 3-boat length circle for that gate mark off the screen. So what you would often have here is after you've been sailing to this side of the course, battling for inside overlap, boats come back to the zone, and let's say they enter the zone like this. Green is definitely ahead of red. Green is sailing by the lee. Red is on a broad reach, or maybe green was more aggressive here, and green was trying to sail red away from the mark, and then they realized that green is actually inside the 3-boat length circle, and then red can call for room, and assuming green also agrees that, green now has to allow red to sail around the mark as necessary to sail the course, has to allow red to sail to the mark. Maybe let's put them over here so that this isn't such an extreme by the lee angle. So now they're sailing to the mark. And now it would be very tempting, because red has to do a jibe rounding here, be very tempting for red to do a big juicy rounding like that. But this is the situation where, because green has right of way, green only has to allow red to sail around this mark as necessary to sail the course. So it could force green to take quite a tight rounding here. Green could force red to take quite a tight rounding there. If I could flip this boat over. Of course, it would make more sense for green to do a proper rounding, slow down and follow in behind red. But if we're talking about how much of right of way, what rights does red have here? Red is only allowed to sail as necessary to round this mark, maybe in a seaman-like manner. So if we go back to our more common rounding to port, then if we have our starboard boat and our port boat, now we come into a different situation because the boat that had mark room, let's say they enter something like this, green is miles ahead of red's line coming off their transom, so green definitely has inside overlap. They're coming in, let's say red's moving pretty fast here. Now, green has mark room, but that almost doesn't matter. It's more of a starboard and port situation. If we go to this situation, we've got a windward and leeward here. So green is the starboard leeward boat. Blue's also on starboard but windward. So here, green is allowed to do a proper course rounding. So it's allowed to sail the course that they would sail in absence of blue. Usually that's thought of as a more reasonable rounding than the minimum necessary rounding. If this is just a simple windward-leeward course, then green is actually prohibited from sailing blue off the course by a separate rule, Rule 18.4, the jibing rule, which says that until you've jibed as green, so until green jibed, they're not allowed to sail above their proper course. So the proper course being the course they would sail if nobody else was around. So green is not allowed to sail this way until they've jibed. Once they've jibed, they're allowed to sail higher than their proper course. But at that point, sailing higher than their proper course doesn't help them. You just hit the mark. Rule 18.4 says that green is allowed to do a proper course rounding, which is a nicer rounding, but even though they have right of way, they're not allowed to just push red away from the course. Again, that's the same with our red boat. If red represents port tack here, green is allowed to sail a much more comfortable natural mark rounding here, but green is not allowed to sail red off the course. Say, hey, starboard, starboard. So then if red was really with it, they could say, oh, excuse me, Rule 18.4 specifies that you have to jibe at that mark. So the other thing that I wanted to cover here is that, I should have erased my gate because this was not a gate for this situation, is if it is a gate. The race committee has messed up if they put a gate this close together. They're supposed to put the gate far enough apart that the zones don't overlap. But let's just make a smaller gate for the sake of my setup here. At a gate mark, it could be totally reasonable that you were going to the other mark. Maybe we'll do our windward-leeward situation here. So blue has been favoring this side of the course all along. They wanted to go to the yellow mark. Green wasn't really paying attention, and green actually wants to go to that mark. Green saw that there's a big puff coming in over here. That 18.4 rule doesn't apply at a gate. So there's nothing requiring green to jibe here. Green could sail all the way over to here, although in this case, green would have to give blue room at the green mark. Blue, who's probably pretty pissed off at this point, or blue could just slow down and sail their own race. So if it's a gate mark, you are allowed to cut across to the other side. And also, the implication of that is that you can do a very aggressive rounding, if that's your thing, at a gate mark. There's nothing requiring you not to sail above your proper course until you've jibed. We've covered a lot of ground here, so let's summarize. First of all, you decide whether or not someone gains overlap. At the moment, the first of the two boats enter the zone. Is the other boat overlapped inside that boat or not? Then the definition of mark room. Blue has to allow green to sail around the mark the correct direction for the course. In this case, this way. Blue has to allow green to sail to the mark. And then once they get to the mark, blue has to allow green to sail around the mark as necessary to sail the course. But as it's set up here, that all doesn't matter. Because this boat already has right-of-way over blue, being the leeward boat. So in this case, the most important thing is the Rule 18.4, which says that until green jibes, they're not allowed to sail above their proper course. Proper course being the course they'd sail if no other boat was there. So in this case, that course would probably be something like this. Maybe they could do a nice rounding if they wanted to tack here or something. But they're not allowed to sail over there. Unless there is a gate mark. So if you're also allowed to round that way, then green can sail wherever they want to sail as long as they keep right of way and they allow blue to keep clear of them. So they could do something wild if they felt like it. To finish off, I have some review questions from the perspective of if you have mark room, if you're the person with mark room. So when you are required when are you required to only sail a minimum seaman-like rounding? So I'll give you a second to pause if you want to think that through and see if your answer is similar to mine. Okay, and the answer... when the outside boat has right-of-way. You have mark room, so you're only allowed the minimum rounding as necessary to sail the course in a seaman-like way. Next question. When are you allowed to sail your proper course around the mark, but no more than your proper course? So this is your opportunity to pause and think about it. See if your answer is like my answer. My answer is when you have right-of-way, but you have to jibe to keep sailing the course. That's when you're restricted to sailing no higher than your proper course. Now, next question. When are you allowed to sail around the mark however you like? And my disclaimer is as long as you allow the other boat to keep clear, so you don't go so wild that you hit them while they're trying to avoid you. This is your opportunity to pause. So my answer, when you have right of way at a gate mark. And you're the inside overlap boat. So all this time, the U is the inside overlap boat. My last question, which rules do I need to read up on? Rules or definitions do I need to read up on to learn this for myself? You can look up, you can download the rule book for free off the World Sailing website. This is your opportunity to pause. Now my answer is rules 18.2 and 18.4. 18.2 is a big rule. There's lots of parts of 18.2. And then also the definitions of mark room. And if you're wondering where the word Seamanlike comes from, that's hidden at the end of the definition of room. So hope you learned something out of this.